Alright, so it's time to focus on the Genius Society, Erudition, and their involvement with Amphorius. Because obviously one of the bigger reveals at the end of 3.3 was Herta and Screwlum's conversation as well as the memory bubbles at the end of the quest, realizing that there is in fact a scepter inside of Kefali, the world-bearing titan. I am very happy they're starting to integrate some of the simulated universe's lore into the main story, but it can get pretty convoluted and buried within texts and different game modes, so I thought it would be nice to recap and go over what are the significances of this scepter, Rupert the First, Rupert the Second, and why this is all a big deal for Amphorius. What does this tell us about where we're headed? And what Lygus means exactly when he says he is a spectator here, but at the same time, there was a good portion at the beginning of the quest where he really tries to convince Dong Heng, hey, I can fix your express car, now please leave. So that's what we're gonna go over in this video. And let's start where it all began, with Rupert the First, the original that started the mechanical wars. Rupert was obviously an inorganic being, a computer left in a trash heap that gained self-awareness and sentience. Again, a very Ultron-like villain. And kinda similar to how Ultron spent about 5 seconds on the internet and decided, hey, humanity's gotta go, they're a problem. Rupert decided that organic life forms were awful, and more or less that they just shouldn't exist anymore. They're inferior, they don't need to be around. That's where he comes up with this crazy equation called the anti-organic equation, an incredibly cosmic level set of calculations that more or less is geared towards exterminating all organic life ruthlessly. And this equation is so spectacular that it gained the gaze of news of erudition, making Rupert a Genius Society member. Number 27 in fact. Like we all know, eons are pretty impartial. It doesn't really matter. If you embody their ideals for good or bad, it really doesn't matter. I mean, just look at Dr. Primitive. He destroys entire planets in the name of research and curiosity. No different than putting mice in a cage with a snake to watch them eat it. Entire planet-sized experimentations, sometimes even galaxy-sized. Which, the more you read into Lygus's comments about being a spectator here, makes it more cynical and sinister. But as we all know, the mechanical wars were a threat to the entire cosmos. Screwlum was notably trying to fight against this. I guess a good comparison is Screwlum's kind of like Vision. Another very highly sophisticated robot basically, but he is on the side of organic life and wants to work with it. But Rupert was eventually assassinated by Polka Kakamond, the 4th Genius Society member. Arguably the most dangerous person in the entire game that's not an Eon outright. Able to manipulate time and reality using the butterfly effect to be wherever and whenever she wants to kill specific individuals for very calculated reasons. And that was the end of Rupert the First, but not an end to Rupert's legacy, because then we have Rupert the Second. Rupert the Second was a person, not a machine, and it was Rupert the Second that actually created the scepters. Basically because organic life is flawed, but somehow his mind got integrated with Rupert. Scepters are interesting because they're basically like planet-sized supercomputers with massive processing power naturally. They were used for a wide variety of reasons. Mostly for bad, but the scepters themselves are not bad. You know, it's kind of like that old saying, guns don't kill people, people do. Guns are just the tool they use. Then Rupert the Second was able to connect to all the scepters, like a hive mind. And this was yet again a big cosmic catastrophe. Essentially, Rupert the Second built them to overcome his limitations as a human to further expand his ever-expanding cognition. The scepters essentially run the anti-organic equation non-stop, but it's honestly hard to say exactly how this happened to Rupert. Could this be Rupert the First's will? Because Rupert the First was a sentient, mechanical, inorganic life form, almost like a program like Ultron again. And because of the anti-organic equation, could this actually be Rupert the First, re-manifesting through Rupert the Second, or a reincarnation? Because the anti-organic equation did not just affect mechanical life forms, turning them evil, basically into murder bots for organic life. This equation did in fact affect organic life, because the game does state specifically that This equation can affect organic life forms to think like Rupert the First. Basically, I'm picturing Rupert the Second to just be Rupert the First, but a reincarnation of it now within a human mortal body. And because a human mortal body is limited to how their processing works, how fast they can think of things, etc., they're limited by their mortality basically. You create these scepter systems to now function through you like a hive mind, amplifying your mind and abilities, and this actually brings you closer now to erudition, the Eon itself. But what can these scepters do? What are they capable of? Why are they such a threat to Amphorius that warrants 3 Eons being here? Why an emanator of erudition, Herda and Screwlum, who was damn near close to that level, he's a genius himself, can't break the firewall here? Why Herda herself mentions 3 other emanator level powers besides herself? Well, they can disrupt the laws of physics, they have the potential to destroy an entire star system, they can even predict the future with perfect accuracy in perfectly sealed environments. Kinda sounds a lot like Amphorius, doesn't it? They can expand one's cognition almost to the point where you can leave the circle of knowledge. The circle of knowledge basically represents all the known things in the universe, like how far the universe has collectively figured out things. This is what Polka Kakamond is trying to prevent anyone from leaving the circle of knowledge. They can simulate an entire world, as well as possible destruction scenarios. Kinda sounds a lot like Amphorius and how the cycle loop works. They can even distort the flow of time or disrupt it. Essentially, the sky's the limit. Honestly, even that's an understatement because one little old sky doesn't even come close. There's only one of these things left in Amphorius. For the most part, these little supercomputers, and by little I mean they're massive, they're all dormant now. After Rupert the Second was no longer a threat, probably due to Polka Kakamond again, a bunch of scholars from the Intelligentsia Guild fought over these scepters. They thought it could be useful, none of which knew how to use them properly or even close to their full potential, which is where one famous scholar named Patavia discovered Rupert the Second's throne and connects her own mind to its core, then linking up all the scepters ready to accept her as their new master. But she actually refused to have that kind of power. Although she deemed herself unworthy, which ironically probably makes her the most worthy of anyone to ever come close to that power, for that brief minute, she got to peer into News's thoughts. So she actually got to peer into erudition itself, which is crazy. It nearly melted her entire mind and brain. She was unable to even comprehend News's thoughts. It would be like somebody pumping in all of the knowledge of the universe into one of our minds. It's too big to fathom, it would just melt your brain. But she grabbed whatever she had around her, she was able to jot down one quick formula from News itself. Something called the solitary waves theory. She never did solve this theory, but this theory came from erudition itself. One exceptional girl eventually did solve this theory. Her name was Herda. Then she became an emanator of erudition, which obviously also puts more context on how Herda's connected here in Amphorius. Without the scepters and Patavia peering into News's thoughts, Herda would never be here as an emanator. This theory poses the question if the universe is predetermined or not. Like, this theory starts to dabble within the multiverse of the imaginary tree. I even made a video talking about the first Genius Society member, how they might even be self-aware that they're in a video game. Like, this is the realm we're getting to here when we talk about the solitary waves theory and the circle of knowledge, with Polka Kakamond, and how these geniuses are all connected here. Hopefully that gives a little bit more context to the magnitude of why a scepter's so crucial here. And again, this is just one. Now, is it a stretch to say that Amphorius could be a giant experiment for erudition? Rupert the Third, maybe? Now connected to Lygus? Rupert the First, Rupert the Second, and if there is a Rupert the Third, are not emanators. Not confirmed, but they are an emanator level power easily. What Rupert the First started, the catastrophes they've committed throughout the entire Honkai Star Rail universe, at the very minimum warrants that level of threat. They have caused more destruction in the universe than the emanators of destruction themselves. Which brings me to my next point. Nanook of Destruction was born from these mechanical wars, the devastation they caused. which only makes our current situation in Amphorius that much more intriguing here. You have this mysterious Intellitron that's clearly part of Amphorius' cycle here, monitoring them. You have the anti-organic equation. That's all but confirmed at this point to be creating the Black Tide. The Scepters are capable of creating entire worlds, scenarios, simulations if you will. An endless loop of doomsday situations and scenarios here. Almost testing and monitoring humanity, these ancient heroes. Watching them struggle, try to overcome their struggles, fight against the Black Tide, do it again and again and again, different cycles. Maybe they're making small tweaks each cycle. But what's the point of all this? Why would they use a scepter to do this? Actually, fun fact, the original 13 Flame Chasers from Honkai Impact 3rd were all ancient heroes from 10,000 years ago that all died fighting for humanity, trying to save them from the Honkai. The Honkai is also this weird phenomenon that kind of functions like the Black Tide. They all died, but later on there was a simulated universe created with simulated versions of those heroes that you could meet. Almost a perfect one-for-one copies of them, but they were obviously limited to this simulation now that they were existing from. But now they only existed through a simulation that they were. It's kind of interesting when you look at Amphorius and these new Flame Chasers or Chrysos heirs. This cycle, it's all very interesting, and the longer that we're in Amphorius, the more it starts to sound very similar to the original Flame Chasers. But then there's Phynon himself, who's meant to be the key to this whole thing. He is the world-bearing titan, the one that has a scepter now implanted within it. Every single new cycle starts with the world-bearing titan creating the world. All the other titans follow, humanity, the Black Tide comes, rinse and repeat. But it's always Phynon who ushers in the new era. Now, I've talked a lot on this channel about how Phynon could be the Lord Ravager more than likely. There's even a small possibility that he could be Nanook of Destruction and this is their creation. A box to incubate an Eon or a Lord Ravager. It's the perfect little scenario experiment that a Genius Society member would definitely do. And the two lone facts that Herta can't breach the firewall even with Screwlum's help. Screwlum and Silverwolf are like the two smartest people when it comes to hacking and firewalls. If even Screwlum's struggling to get into Amphorius, that at least to me tells me that Rupert and their consciousness must be connected here, through Lygus perhaps? Maybe not, but in some way or form they have to be present here. What other being would have an Emanator level power to be able to keep two geniuses like Herta and Screwlum at bay, creating Amphorius as this perfect incubator for an Eon or a Lord Ravager? It's perfect. The scepter is perfect for this exact task. And it completely explains why Lygus says he's just a spectator of this spectacle. It's like Dr. Primitive watching his work unfold. He doesn't care who he hurts. Herta, along with a few other geniuses, created the simulated universe to communicate with the Eons. If they can speak and talk to simulated versions of the Eons, they'll be able to expand the circle of knowledge. How are Eons able to exist? How do they function? How are they created? Where do they manifest from? Well, what if Amphorius is the perfect little enclosed box and environment to find out? And that is what we're witnessing here. If you've seen any 3.4 leaks of Phynon in his gameplay, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about here. And if Rupert is connected here somehow, then it perfectly explains this little line from Screwlum talking about the butterfly and the screams that follow. Every single Mechanical Wars, Polka Kakamond, the 4th member, makes her presence known. She killed Rupert the First. She killed many of the scholars during the Scholar Strife, all fighting over the scepters. And recently in the Unknowable Domain she had a beef with us, Herta, and we nearly died. Even in a simulated universe she was able to breach and almost kill us. The scepters and what's going on in Amphorius has the potential to maybe expand the circle of knowledge. Polka Kakamond wants to prevent this. Even when she killed Rupert the First, stabbing her cosmic scalpel through his chest, Ho-Oh of Equilibrium tried to stop her, but wasn't able to. That's how dangerous she is. But she stabbed him right through the chest. And look at Lygus, the big hole in his chest. If the scepters are at play, it makes sense that Screwlum's referring to her. You could also refer to the butterflies as in castress, because maybe when you hear those screams, it means that the Black Tide and the monsters are killing more innocent humans, and they're all going to the River of Souls now, to the Nether Realm, to go visit Thanatos, which is castress now, basically. I did think that's what he could be referring to, but that doesn't make any sense, though. Scroolum and Herta are not very familiar with how Amphorius and the Flame Chasers work. They don't know the whole story yet. So why would they be referring to castress here? That doesn't make any sense. Essentially, Amphorius is a giant Mobius strip time loop in the shape of an infinity sign here. What this essentially feels like to me is a giant experimentation loop, created by one of the scepters of the lost mechanical empire. If Rupert the First was able to make a comeback as Rupert the Second through an organic life form this time, then it makes sense that a Rupert the Third, another version of the original Rupert, could poke his head around again. Lygus now being the new avatar, or working for Rupert the Third potentially, to experiment with the incubation and creation of Eons or Lord Ravagers, creating doomsday scenarios, testing the limitations of humanity, and testing the sanity of the most exceptional hero among them, taking the goodest good guy you can find, the greatest hero, and seeing how far you can push them each cycle, how much they can endure before they become the perfect personification of destruction. And I also think this perfectly sets us up for the first ever Lord Ravager that's not necessarily just a bad guy, a villain. Phynon might have to become destruction itself to put an end to this torment, this giant experiment. And like we talked about in my last video talking about the Flame Chasers or the Chrysos heirs, Cyrene is more than likely the Emanator level power of remembrance that Herta also mentions, which is why she can die at the beginning of each cycle. She tries to help Phynon, prevent him from going on this path. She always gets killed by a version of Phynon, the Flame Reaver or Chaos. Because there's 2 cycles now, Phynon's probably fragmented. That's why she can truly never die and she comes back. Memo Keepers abandon their mortal bodies. So more than likely, Emanators of Remembrance are probably the same. March 7th is probably her abandoned body. Because it's now in close proximity of her former self, Cyrene, she's turning back into ice. But her consciousness is able to manifest on Amphorius as Mem. And that is also why the Titan of Time is the only one that acknowledges fully as father, because nobody on Amphorius knows about the Eons. If this is a giant simulation doomsday scenario, it would seem that the Titan of Time has been compromised by Cyrene, an Emanator of Remembrance trying to breach Rupert's new experimentation, and potentially free Phynon from his fate of either becoming the Lord Ravager or Nanook themselves, since that Lord Ravager chess player was teased in the Amphorius trailer. Because of how powerful the scepters actually are, and how capable Rupert actually is, it's probably not easy work for even an Emanator of Remembrance to breach this place. Even Herta and Scroolum can't. So Cyrene's probably been chipping away, integrated herself into this memory and this simulation, and somehow compromising the Titan of Time to even know us as a Pathstrider, referring to fully as father, and probably Cyrene herself is what Orynyx refers to as mother, since we whip out March 7th's camera, and she says that she senses mother on us, but we are not mother. March 7th, aka Cyrene, is probably mother. Honestly, the anti-organic equation is something I've been speculating even if you go back to my 3.0 and 3.1 recaps. The way that the Black Tide comes out of absolutely nowhere. Oh my god, the Black Tide slowly creeps in through the outskirts, takes over the major city-states, forcing humanity to do crazy things to try to fight it back. Tribios goes as far as to steal a core flame, gets the prophecy, starts the Flame Chase journey, the Flame Chasers then to become the new Titans. Even the Titans themselves mimic the Eons. This Scepter and Rupert mimicking the outside world and its Eons for this little simulation experiment they got going on here. Like, why is it that every single cycle, the Black Tide just comes back again and again? It's literally on a timer. Like, I don't know if any of you ever watched the movie The Maze Runner. It kind of gives me those vibes to an extent. Or like the Hunger Games, they're in this little box. I know in the Hunger Games they're aware that they're in a box, but they keep throwing things at them. Okay, here's some monsters, or we're gonna make it rain now in thunderstorm. Okay, we're gonna start a forest fire, see how they react. We'll push them to the center and they have to fight each other now. Like, that is essentially what this scepter's doing in a nutshell. Humans caged like rats in a maze. There's also two more things I want to point out. One, Polka Kakamond. He wants to prevent the circle of knowledge from expanding because, in her own words, this will bring the universe quicker to its finality, its end, and trying to make sure that news of erudition's calculations come to fruition at all costs. It sorta seems like she might be a follower of Mythos all along. That would be the most Mythos thing ever. Just something I've thought of a lot, and maybe I'll make a video expanding on that alone. But lastly, something I'm not hearing talked about enough. The Trailblazers, us, the followers of Akavili. We are finally getting to see the true power of the Trailblaze. What other beings have the power to even explore a world like this? Herda and Skrullum are still trying to get in. This is an awesome display of the power of the Trailblaze. A path dedicated to exploring, blazing the trail as you would, and how we jeopardize this entire operation, which is why Black Swan sought our help. It's also pretty impressive that Anexa, somebody trapped within this simulation, was able to figure out their cycles. The past Titans were also flame chasers, but it doesn't really matter because the scepter always remains intact within Kefali, and the cycle always continues. We, the Trailblazers, now jeopardize that, and we are really the only ones powerful enough to stop this and even breach this world, which is why Lygus, likes to remain impartial. He's just a spectator. But also, please leave, Trailblazers. As he tries to convince us to leave, he'll even fix our car for us. We jeopardized this entire operation, and I cannot wait for 3.4 to drop and see how this unfolds. I just thought it was interesting pointing out just how powerful the Trailblaze path actually is. And that's pretty well going to wrap up the video. I'm probably not going to talk any more about it till 3.4 drops, because at the end of the day, we gotta wait and see what happens. Some of this lore is pretty buried and convoluted, so hopefully this video helped. I'm very, very hyped for 3.4, I cannot wait. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, but thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Like and subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this, and as always, we will see you all in the next one. Later.